It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship. Hey, it's Ronsley. If this is your first time listening, welcome. This is a weekly series where I go inside the mind of an entrepreneur, artist, athlete, academic to decipher what is the psychology of our decisions. It's Addendum time. I am really enjoying these because it was invented from a place of trying to fix a problem. The problem was that I couldn't finish my scripting for Volume 7, which was Kelsey Ramsden. So in true entrepreneur style, I made do with what I had, which actually, in hindsight, was a lot. I was in Mexico in a luxurious 5-star hotel called The Montage in Los Cabos, and Kelsey Ramsden was there in person. And her room was one of those high-end suites next to the presidential suite. So I interviewed Kelsey in person in Los Cabos at her suite and released the whole interview in an unabridged fashion. I was hoping to achieve two things. One, buy some time, and two, give you all an insight into my interviewing process and sometimes the dumb questions I land up asking. So today, I have an unabridged full-length interview with a legend called David Burkus. This is the first and only interview I've done virtually for Psychology of Entrepreneurship. And while I've seen Dave now twice in the space of a year, it isn't that we couldn't have done this in person. So here's what's going to happen. This is our online interview, and I'm going to interview Dave in person so I can make a volume about him. In this interview, we talk about leaving money on the table, optimizing for community and not for ROI, taking selfies, and how to promote yourself without actually promoting yourself. You are going to love this conversation because David is a deep, deep thinker about a whole bunch of philosophical things. So here's David and me. Enjoy. It's crazy though, David, like it's become a thing. Like it's become a thing to the point that like I get a lot of shit for forgetting to take the selfie. Like I hang out with some really, really cool people, but I'm not trained mentally to remember to take the selfie, or even if I do take the selfie, I don't know what to do with the selfie, right?
Well, so that's the thing. You don't have to take it because if you wouldn't know, and you know what you're doing in that moment that's way more important than taking the selfie. You're being in that moment. You're focused on having a conversation with that person. Like, again, not to drag friend of a friend into it, but in a book on relationships and networking, that's the biggest thing. Is that I mean, there's a broader problem too that we could speak to, which is this idea that social in general, not even just the Lamborghini entrepreneurship porn side, but just social in general, is not a solid replacement for those relationships, right? So the fact that you're going to like take the selfie and then maybe 6 months later it shows up as a Facebook memory, and then you go, oh guys, remember this? And like that doesn't count as a real interaction. We think it does because it releases the same little chemicals in our brain, but over time, that's not a relationship. Making the time to be in the moment and learn, even if you learn like one extra little thing about somebody because you didn't take that time to get perfectly posed out and snap a shot, you've deepened that relationship way more than proof of having the photo, right? So there's that whole thing too. Yeah.
So it's really interesting, right? How the word entrepreneurship has different meanings, and I suppose it's the word successful we're talking right now about what seems like success, right? It's like it seems successful if I'm taking these pictures with these kind of people, or it seems successful if whatever, and then it becomes really unfortunate for the ones that put their life work into putting out a book or putting out like a new podcast episode, and you go, I actually really want people to listen to this, but do I fall into the same category, or is it like how do you like put your voice out there or put your work out there without falling into that category of being like a fucking lame ass jackass.
How do you promote your work without promoting yourself, in essence, right? I mean, I think it comes down to, and I hate to say this because then all the Lambros of the world are just gonna start using testimonials the way they use their personal things. But it comes down to that sort of help piece. Like I've spent 6 years now writing and speaking and generating all of my income sort of from book deals and sales, and then from being invited to go give talks or workshops somewhere. And I never made one of those sort of like sizzle reels until about a week ago. Right. And the reason we made it had nothing to do with, look at how awesome I am, here's my highlight reel. The reason we made it is that we started to have a really hard time explaining the process that I use to get ready for a talk with an organization, which is different than your average sort of, I'm going to show up and I've got a presentation in a can and you're going to love it. Right. I want to go a little bit deeper in what are your needs and this and that. And then I'm going to go look at this whole like pile of human behavior research and pull out 2 or 3 things and then build something from there. And explaining that to people, like we were losing business because we were struggling to find a way to explain to people that that's actually better than what these other things are. So we basically took the tool that they were using, but framed it not as, look at how amazing I am and look at all of these places that I mean, there's a little clip of me on CBS this morning just because, why wouldn't you use that clip? But it's not full of that, here's my awesome testimonials and highlight reels and whatever. It's, here's how we're going to help you. Right. And this is what we do and what makes it different in a way that's going to help you. And I think that's how you promote yourself without feeling self-promotional, is you promote the help that your work provides, right? Like you go on my website, the very first thing it even says is, how can I help you? And then there's 3 buttons, and depending on which one you click, we're going to steer you towards resources that help you with that. We're not looking to like do an email conversion with a tripwire for $7 and then upsell you a course on the whatever. We're not looking to do that. We're just like, we're here to help you. And if we give you good stuff, you'll come back. And the problem with that is that like, this is the reason I think a lot of entrepreneurs can fall into that trap, is that self-promotion is great at if you're optimizing for a conversion, right? I'm optimizing for a fan base, and it's a different thing. Like I don't optimize for conversion. I'm optimizing for community. What I don't want is somebody to open up, to type in their Visa information one time and send me $200 so that I can make my Lambo payment, right? What I want is for somebody who reads one of my books or hears me give a talk, goes back and buys the whole backlist and ends up chatting with me on Twitter or on LinkedIn about the concepts. And then other people who are familiar with my work chime in, and now we're having this long conversation. Like, that's my version of scaling, right? For a lot of other people, scaling is just, oh, well, I know if I spend $50 on Facebook ads, I'll make $100. So I'll take that all the way to the bank. That's optimizing for conversion. I want to optimize for community.
I love that distinction. It's such a beautiful distinction because, I suppose the kinds of clients that we get, like an Amplify, that come here and kind of go, well, can you help us put a voice to our brand? There are 2 types of people. They're the ones that kind of go, if there's no ROI or you can't explain to me where the ROI is, I won't do this. And there's the other kind of people who go, I want to create this beautiful piece of work, but I can't sell anything because I'll be selling my soul. And it's just like this. I think it's a distinction in your head as well, in our heads, where if we sell, we feel like snake oil salesman-y type, I suppose. And I wonder whether that takes away from all the effort that we take into actually doing our craft, right? And that's what you're talking about with the reel. You're actually talking about how you do your craft differently to anyone else who would just kind of open Keynote and I suppose put a few slides in.
Right. And by the way, like, we're still probably going to lose a greater percentage of the business than your average sort of motivational speaker. I'm fine with that, because those motivational speakers are optimizing for conversions. They're just trying to get you to sign on the dotted line so they can come. And if you're disappointed at the end, who cares? You already paid your fee. And not everybody is this way, but a lot of people are. And it's that churn. As soon as you start talking about cost per conversion and churn rates and that sort of thing, you're not thinking about building a community. You're thinking about how much investment do I have to put in to make hopefully a number that's higher than that. And that will lead you down a path where all of the metrics you pay attention to are per conversion. I mean, this is what you're struggling with your agency too, is convincing people that like, look, I can't show you an ROI. And by the way, once I show it to you, you now get obsessed with making that formula work and cranking that whatever number you got to put in. Now you've got all the dials adjusted, and now you're going to put in bigger numbers to get bigger numbers out the other side. And now you're not taking care of people. Now you're just running a machine. And that's great if that's what you want to do, but like, that's not interesting to me. For one thing, I don't want to deal with the amount of customer service you would have to deal with by having that many disappointed customers, right? Like what I love about my life, right, is occasionally somebody will say, hey, I read your book and I didn't like it for this and this and this and this reason. And I go, well, hopefully 30 days hasn't passed by and you can send it back to Amazon. Like, great, you know?
Do you feel? I mean, look at the list of accomplishments, David. Like TED, and 2 books, and like all those. You put them all out one after the other. I mean, it's tempting to say these are my achievements, right? It's tempting to kind of put it out there, like, or actually even worse, someone else putting it out there, and you kind of looking at that and going, I wonder whether I'm leaving money on the table. And the reason I'm asking this question is very, very selfish, right? It's a selfish conundrum that I face in my head all the time, because for the longest time at Amplify, we did not take the clients who kind of went, hey, I have an idea for a show. I need you to produce it. And we're going, no, thank you. We need to be part of the whole process, because what's going to happen is you're going to ask us for ROI at the end and we won't have an answer for you. So we never took those people, but we lose money on those people because that's the innovation bit. And we spend all this time and effort and curate and build a team and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like, I don't know, as a business owner, my job is to actually, raise profit and grow the team. I don't know. So that's the question, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, so your first question was, do I ever wonder if I'm leaving money on the table? No, I don't wonder. I am 100% sure that I leave money on the table. Right? 100% sure. If I didn't want to do that, then I would have built out an online course for every single book that I have. And then I would have a day-long rally the troops event once a year based on sort of those themes of the book, where other big celebrity people would come in, and then at that we would sell a high ticket mastermind. I know the people that do that, right? I've written about some of them. I'm just not interested in that, right? And to your point about, as a business owner, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility for profit. You don't have a responsibility for more profit. The beautiful thing about this life that we call entrepreneurship is you get to decide how big or small your business is. And when you've got employees, yes, you got a responsibility to make payroll. But that's it. And you can have less employees. I have one part-time assistant. I love her. When I was a full-time business school student, she was a student of mine, and then she did freelance projects. And now she's part-time, and I split her with 2 other guys that do what I do. And it's a wonderful life for her, and it's great for me. Don't get me wrong. I get paranoid about, like, I got to make sure I'm making enough money to pay her. But beyond that, like, no, I don't have a responsibility to that. I have a set number of gigs I want to do every year. I will say I've got a goal for a set number of books I want to sell every year, and I've never hit it. So that, from a growth perspective, that's what I've been looking on. But the dollar amount is not actually all that much. It's much more about just knowing kind of the people. But that's because I've optimized it in such a way that that's the max I want to support. Because you're always going to leave money on the table. You know what I really want to make sure that I don't leave on the table is time, right? I only have so much of that. And I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I'm a speaker who doesn't like being on planes and being away from them, right? So what I'm trying to do is say, what's the right amount where we've got this comfortable life? I know I'm making an impact. I know I'm helping people. And I know other people are getting booked way more often. And I know other people are selling books way more often, but I still get to be a superhero to those 2. And I got 11 more years with one of them, right? And I got 13 with the other. If at the end of that, I decide to sort of scale up and whatever, great. I bet you I won't, because I'm hoping I'll still have that wife. And if I play my cards right and keep time, I'll still have the wife for whom did most of the work of those kids. And now I'll enjoy time with her. Right. And like, those those are the things that I'll look back on and go, great. So what is my responsibility? I don't have a responsibility to make more profit. I have a responsibility to make enough profit. And that's a very different mindset that I don't think a lot of the Instagram entrepreneurs have.
According to a study from American Express Open, the average entrepreneur pays himself or herself an annual salary of $68,000. According to the same study, 15% of entrepreneurs feel that they need to work a second job to help make ends meet.
So how did you get there, David? Because I'm keen to understand that, because it's not. So here's the thing, right? I mean, what you're saying, I'm picking up everything you're putting down, and I totally relate 100%. I know for a fact that we've run events just for the love of doing the event, purely lost money in the process, just gonna kind of go, oh, that would be a cool thing to put together, and no regrets about it at all. And I love that part. It's just, I suppose, how do you get to a point where you're comfortable with just being you, I suppose? Because we're always pulled and pushed into these different sort of molds of, being an entrepreneur, and you have a really nice sort of life, and everyone has this different version of what an entrepreneur is. It's either cutthroat, or she's like has great success but no family, or she has these kind of awards, or he's written this book, and that's what an entrepreneur is. But you can build your own life and you're still an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, the short version of how I got there is I had all sorts of delusions of grandeur, and then I didn't hit them, and I realized that my family loved me anyway. Right? That's the short version. I mean, I've had 3 books now, and each one has had, I promise you, I've put in the same amount of work into writing it, the same amount of creativity into writing it. I've gotten a little incrementally better each time. So the newest ones are always sort of a better read. Put the same amount of hours in terms of promotion and media and that kind of stuff, and had vastly different results because I can't predict what the market likes, right? I can have an inkling of what some people need, but I can't predict. It's a roll of the dice. I mean, my grand theory with this sort of thinker business model is that the max you could probably do is say 10 to 20,000 copies. I know I have this many people that like my work that I can guarantee. Beyond that, it's whether or not some weird mix of factors clicks in place and you go viral and go beyond that, right? Maybe other people's number are a bit higher, but I don't think anybody's number is very large. That's just a built-in guaranteed this will buy it, right? So when you have those vast swings, you have 2 choices, basically. You can be manic depressive and get super excited and think that it's because the world loves you when you're succeeding, and be super depressed when you're not. Or you can realize that there are factors I control and factors I don't. And my job is to just focus on the factors that I control and let the rest go. And when you let the rest go, you realize, like, for one thing, you have to bring your identity. You have to draw your identity from more than that. Like the entrepreneurs that are working 80, 90, 100 hours a week, many of them are doing it because their whole identity is wrapped up in that thing that they're doing. I've had a pretty good run, right? So I've given a TED Talks 2 million views. I was number 48 out of 50 actually sounds depressive. And like the number of business thinkers in the world, right? Or the ranking of it. 3 books, a couple bestsellers. Got some of them. I have like a medal somewhere over here from one of them. I don't that's cool. And it'd be really easy to draw identity from that. But then when these ebbs and flows comes, you end up manic depressive. So the thing that I sort of flipped that first time we had the really big bucket or the really big drop, and I was in the bucket, I was going, man, this sucks, right? Why does this suck? Like, why am I miserable? I'm getting emails from people that say that, oh, your book helped me with this and this and this. And I'm getting invitations to speak, but they're not as many as before. And I'm still miserable. Why? Well, usually because I'm comparing myself to one of the Instagram highlight reels of somebody else who scaled that whole thing. And he or her is drawing their whole identity from that. And that was sort of what I realized. Like, all right, I have 2 choices. I can work 100 hours a week and try and be that bigger brand. Or I can go, all right, I'm going to need to draw satisfaction from other areas of my life. And the thing that I found is that, like, that's better, right? Ryan Holiday, our mutual friend, has this great thing about comparison traps and the idea that if you look at somebody else and you go, oh, I really want their success here, like it's only appropriate to do that if you would be willing to trade your whole life for their whole life, right? So how then do you win against every comparison trap? You build a well-rounded life to where you'd go, yes, it'd be really cool to be that New York Times bestselling author who has 10 million views on his TED Talk. And everybody's always inviting him somewhere. And he's got the perfect accent and the perfect black rim glasses. And you can probably picture who I'm talking about. I won't name him. It'd be perfect. But you know what? It would suck to be 50 and single. That would suck. So I'm not willing to do that. Right. And I think the same thing with a lot of the entrepreneurs that have other business models that are thinking, oh, am I leaving money on the table? Like maybe, but at least I get to share that table with people I love instead of like reheat a meal and eat it over the sink.
Wow. Mic drop there, brother. Like I wonder, how often people get a chance to hear you get on a soapbox, because it's really, really beautiful.
I probably don't rant as much as I should, but I do those little Daily Burke everyday videos, and sometimes they're a rant. I just recorded one that was a rant about another mutual friend of ours who was disappointed, and I was then yelling at him because I said, "Why would you set a goal where someone else determines whether or not you hit it?" Right. And so then I went on a whole other rant about that, but I think you saw it, so I'll just leave it there.
Right. That makes total sense. Like, I think you hit on a few points there, including definitions of success. And a lot of the times those definitions have been given to us, or we've adopted them for some reason. We don't even know why. How, in your opinion, like, I mean, two young kids, I'm super curious, like, how do you develop in their heads their definitions of success?
Yeah. I don't know.
I literally thought of that question right now. Like,
No. I mean, it's not that I've never thought of it. It's that I don't know if I'm doing it right. I know what I'm trying, right? Which is the number one thing I'm trying to instill in both of those kids is a growth mindset. An idea that like literally, earlier today, my son's got into this thing where, so backstory. So for the last 13 years, my hobby has been Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it for 13 years. I love it. It's the only, I think any other form of exercise is boring, right? But one of the things that it instills in you is that growth mindset that you get better over time, right? And both of my kids have started it. My 7-year-old has started to make the connections between that art, and wrestling is the same way, or MMA. Most of these sort of combat sports are a lot. You'll hear people describe them as sort of human chess, or in boxing, they say the sweet science, which I don't understand because there's no science there, but whatever. And they talk about the strategy and the responses and the point counterpoints and all of that kind of stuff. And so I've been talking, and we kept using the term chess. So he decided he wanted to learn chess, right? So today we sat down at the table and I taught him how to play chess, right? And I demolished him, not because I'm good at chess, but because I'm a grown man and he's 7, right? And so he starts crying, and I'm like, dude, why are you crying? He goes, because I lost, and it was my first time. And I said, yeah, everyone loses on their first time. And he kind of looked at me like, huh? And therein is the growth mindset lesson, right? Like everybody loses their first time, right? And that's okay, because the whole point is you lose and learn, right? So that's that more than anything else. I mean, I don't have life outcome goals for them other than like they're not in prison and they haven't gotten someone pregnant, before 21. We're not in prison ever, but the other thing, right? Those are the only outcome goals I have. What I care about is whether or not we've instilled that sort of growth mindset that you're going to try things, you're going to fail, and that's part of the process. And so and it's the same as what we were talking about before with a business, right? There, your ebbs and flows are not attached to your successes and failures, because a lot of times you don't control those. Your successes and your happiness, your satisfaction is tied to your inputs. What did you actually put in? And if you don't get the result you wanted, as long as you learn, that's still an acceptable result. That's that growth mindset. That's what we're trying to learn. I hope that also turns them into millionaires, but like if they end up teaching skiing and living in like a little shack on the side of a mountain, whatever, like I'll still be happy, right? Again, as long as they're not in prison. So, that's it. And by the way, I have nothing against the prison community. They probably have more of a growth mindset afterwards. I'm just saying, like, I think everyone would be in agreement that it's better not to end up in one than to end up in one and learn the lesson.
I remembered a Chris Rock bit where he says, "My only job in life is to keep my daughter off the pole," and you know, it's a great goal, I suppose. I kind of really want to talk about network because I think network has gotten this bad rep. Like, I suppose entrepreneurship, it's like the sleazy person that's going to networking quote unquote events just to get more sales seems to be the definition everyone's gravitating towards, even though it actually isn't. How do you feel?
Yeah. No, I actually, I mean, we have a different side of the same coin here. We were talking about before, we were joking about Facebook ads to a conversion page. And as long as I'm spending 50 to make 100, unfortunately, like, networking got sullied by sales reps and job hunters, both of whom you could smell the desperation on. I get it. Your success and failure is still going to come through your network. But somewhere along the line, a lot of people started thinking that it was just a numbers game, that if I meet a certain number of people, a certain percentage of them will be able to help me, and then I'll be able to leverage that. And so the name of the game then, networking, becomes running up the score. How many connections do you have on LinkedIn? How many people did you meet at that networking event, et cetera? And the thing that I always try and get people to realize is that networking is not about meeting strangers. Where I come from is I had this desire to attack this issue from the standpoint of the science of human social networks, how humans are connected to each other. And the big mindset shift I had when I was doing all that research is that there's more to it than meeting strangers. Networking is not about running up the score. And in fact, I go so far as to say you can't grow your network, build your network, improve your network. I hate when we use those terms because you can't grow your network. You don't have a network. It's not yours to own. You exist inside of one, right? There's one large one, 7.4 billion people strong and counting. And then there's the sort of smaller branches of it that are your community that you're in, your group of entrepreneurs that you're in, et cetera. And it works best for you when you decide that your goal is to figure out how to navigate that network properly, figure out how to nurture those connections you already have, make new ones, yes, but like within this context that it's about making the whole community stronger. Then you win much more successfully than if you're just trying to add to the contacts app on your phone and then spam everybody and hope some of them want to buy insurance.
Right. And I think was that the motivation for Friend of a Friend? Was that the motivation to kind of to write that book?
That's that sort of initial motivation. And what we do in that book is unpack, here are the different principles of how networks work. Some of them you've probably heard before, like what's the story with 6 degrees of separation? What's the deal with strength of weak ties? Those sort of things. But the idea was like, this is not a textbook on how to give an elevator pitch. This is a textbook on here's how the community that you're in is working. Now you go figure out what you need to do. Now that you can analyze where you are in this community, you can figure out where you want to be, who you want to be connected to, where your blind spots are. Now you go make a plan to figure out what actions you have to take. But my goal was to say, look, this whole approach of like, just run up the score. And so do these things and you'll meet more people. That's the wrong approach. You already exist inside of a network. Let's learn how that network works, so that you can move forward. And in fact, How Networks Work was the original terrible title of the book.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
The main objective of this audio project is to bring together entrepreneurs and creatives who share similar values in a place where conversation can be had without judgment. A place where our listeners can give us constructive feedback to improve this show with topic and guest recommendations. For access to full-length interviews and access to that place, go to mustamplify.com/POE and click the button.
That's the wrong approach. You already exist inside of a network. Let's learn how that network works so that you can move forward. And in fact, How Networks Work was the original terrible title of the book.
But it totally makes sense, right? How networks work. I mean, when you think about what
it would have ended up in like a computing section of the bookstore. So that would have been awful.
That's crazy, because I can totally see that too. What you covered there and how you explain network, even though I've heard you say that before, that's the first time it actually sat differently with me, because it's like really interesting, because all this while I kind of thought, like everyone else, I suppose, that I had a network as opposed to belonging to a network. And that's very, very, very different way of thinking. How did you arrive there? I mean, it's like it's so simple, but like, how did you get there?
Well, I mean, you start. So the biggest thing. So one of the principles of network science is this idea of a structural whole, right? Not to get too nerdy, but a structural whole is a gap in the network that's produced because people cluster to people who are similar to them, right? And so one of the big areas in the context of entrepreneurship that I saw was you can only hear people say so many times that, like, one of the great things about partnering with a VC firm is not the money. You know, the money is great, but it's the other connections that they have access to that you don't have access to. So really what you want out of that firm is, yes, money, but you also want to plug the structural hole that's in your network. So now you're connected to those people, right? You could do the hard work of trying to run up the score of the number of people you meet, and 1 out of 100 of them are going to be that person that you know. But it's a whole lot easier to go friend of a friend, right? To go, I'm connected to this person, and now they're sort of connected to that. You only get that when you survey the whole landscape. When you're just doing the other one, you're basically just putting a lot of work in and praying to the gods of serendipity. And they are cruel, cruel gods. So it's a whole lot easier to just figure out that network, figure out where your structural holes are, for example, of what communities you need to be connected to, and put a plan together. You get a way better return on energy when you do that. So that was sort of the start of it. And then, I mean, again, there was this broader sort of distaste with the same people that are running around taking selfies on private jets are the same people that are running around boasting about how many people they know, as if that is the sign of their success in terms of networking. That's not, how many people you know is not the sign of whether or not you're a good networker. Whether or not you know someone for every problem you could face is the sign of whether or not you're a good networker. And some of those people that have 10,000 connections on LinkedIn are still struggling to find the right person for the right situation. And people with what they would think of as much smaller networks, at least always know who they could ask, or who they could ask for an introduction from to get connected to that resource that they need. That's a way more powerful network. And it's not because it's size, it's because of its interconnectivity and its ability to plug those structural holes.
Oh, mate, that's you know, I love how you encapsulate some concepts that I suppose everyone else thinks about entirely differently. Ladies and gentlemen, davidburkus.com is where you go to check out all the cool stuff he's up to. But when you think about legacy, do you think about legacy? Do you think enough time and distance everyone's forgotten, or do you think I would like to be remembered like this? How does that go down?
Yeah, I mean, not to be cavalier, but there are 3 people, and they're currently in the same building with me, whose opinion of my legacy I actually care about, right? And if those 3 people are crying at my funeral, which is a really strong test, maybe they'll be in shock and maybe they won't, and nobody else cares, that's fine, right? I mean, yes, obviously I would prefer for it to be at Madison Square Garden, because everyone loved that book that I wrote that I don't even know what it is yet, because I don't have an idea that would be that popular. That'd be better, right? But I'm not worried about it. I mean, my goal in interactions, one of the things I always say is that my goal in interactions, whether it's writing, putting out an article, speaking from the stage, is I'm trying to help people do their best work ever. And so when people think of me, if they think of that, like you made me think about things in a way that helped me do my best work ever. You gave me this tactic and that helped me do it. That would be great too. But truthfully, to go back to that whole idea about satisfaction, identity, and whatever, that's a secondary goal. That first one is that first piece. And those 3 people's opinion matters way more. And I guess I'm hoping I live long enough to get grandkids. So maybe they'll be like 7 by the time I actually do die.
I love how you have that number in your head as well. The number 7.
I mean, this is just math. We stopped at 2. If both of them have 2, that adds 4 grandkids to the third. So that's 7. That's just math.
That's a little bit of thinking, man. That's quite a bit of thinking there. I have to say, like, I mean, for someone who doesn't have kids, I that's something I haven't thought about yet. You know, grandkids, Jesus.
Well, I should tell you. So I'm one of 3 kids, and we're the only. I actually got married first. I'm the youngest in my family. I got married first. And I'm the only one to have had kids, and the other 2 don't actually have spouses anymore either. And again, I mean, candidly, part of the reason is that balance piece. So we could have unpacked that whole thing, but that would have taken too long, and I haven't talked to them about that. So let's not go too far down that road. But that, you know, so I get you on the math thing, right? I'm making the assumption that both of my kids are going to have the same number of kids that I do, and I already know that's not the case because I can look at my own family unit for that. So maybe 7 is actually too big of a number. Who knows?
No, but it's kind of like really interesting, the thought processes that we go through and we have in our heads and how they come and how they get there. I'm super curious with all the experience that you bring to today. I'm super curious, like, what is the question that people should be asking but they're not?
Oh, what is the question that people are asking that they should be not? You know, so I guess I could think about it in this context. We live in a time where it seems like the campaign du jour is to throw everything about the old ways out and say, oh, we're going to change this. We're going to disrupt this. And, you know, in some social context, I don't want to get political, but in some social context, you'll see the old ways described as bigoted, right? Or sexist, whatever. And maybe they are. But the point is this idea that, like, now because we're smarter, right, we can throw all of that up. I don't know that that's all useful. I think we actually have to go back and go, what from that worked? G.K. Chesterton, the English writer, brilliant dude, could literally write like 2 novels at once in 2 different hands, right? Like, brilliant dude. And he always said that he gets worried when people are quick to eschew tradition, because tradition is the democracy of the dead. In other words, if the dead had a current vote on our existing social, like how we're doing things, the traditions they handed down would be how they voted. And I think we need to take that into consideration. And one of the, I mean, I'm seeing this, the reason all of this is coming to my head is I'm writing this book, Friend of a Friend, and it's about social networks. And of course, everyone is then saying, oh yeah, well, what do you think of LinkedIn? What do you think of Instagram? What do you think of whatever? And I don't think anything of them because they turn out to be crap tools. Our ancestors knew something way better, that like, you're happier when you only know 100 people, but you know them intimately, right? Those old villages that everybody used to know and everybody knew everybody's business. It seems so opposite of the big city life of 11 million people, never sleeps. It's so exciting. And like, but are you happier? That's a good point. Maybe I'm not. Right. And so I think most of us need to do that. I don't know that we need to do it societally as one big question, but I think each one of us need to go, okay, what things from the past, what traditions did I throw out on the front lawn that maybe I need to go back and say, come on back into the house. You may actually have worked out pretty well.
Did you know that 85% of jobs are filled through networking, and 68% of entry-level professionals value face-to-face networking over online networking?
Yeah, well, it's true, right? I mean, when you think about that closed networked community that everyone knew everything and everyone else's business, what we call gossip, I suppose. Now everyone is following Dancing with the Stars or whatever is popular on TV as gossip, right? But it's the same sort of effect, right? We still feel like we're part of this community because we're following the same sort of gossip, but it's so disconnected because we don't actually know the person. And then we have, I suppose, this separation of identity because everyone only puts the good stuff out there. I'm super curious around Friend of a Friend, because I mean, I came to Australia 22 years ago from India. My mom's got a Portuguese passport. My dad's got an Indian one. I've got an Australian one. Like, my wife's parents are from Austria. It's like fucking all over the place, right? So my question is, Friend of a Friend, how important, how does culture fit into all this? Because, growing up, there are different patterns that people are brought up in. How does that affect it, or does it affect it at all?
So most of the book is built around insights from network science, which is the study of how people connect to each other. And that turns out to be universally true. The difference is then how you execute on it, right? So making an introduction, right? So in the US, for example, making an introduction is like, it's the one-off. I'll send you a text and say, hey, you really need to meet this guy, and you guys will get connected in there. There are other cultures where the idea that you're making an introduction and you're vouching for that person and you're spending your reputation on that person, et cetera, are much deeper, right? The connection piece is still there. And that's all friend of a friend dives into, is that who's connected to whom and who's 1 or 2 degrees of separation out. But executing on that is something that I think it does vary by culture. And that's one of the reasons we tried not to get too prescriptive into like, here's what to do. Like I'm really not a fan of here's the perfect way to give an elevator pitch, because again, that's cultural. Right. In a lot of cases, like a lot of Asian cultures, you don't give an elevator pitch because you're going to meet them 4 or 5 times before you're even talking about what you do. Right. So those things, but I see those as sort of the execution piece, not the strategy piece. And the strategy piece is informed by network science, and that doesn't change, but how you choose it. And that, again, that's why we don't get too prescriptive. The idea is to understand the network you're in, and then hopefully you know enough about the culture you're in to develop that plan.
Right. Well, I think that's so interesting. I mean, because I've never run a global company before, and now we have team in so many different parts of the world. Like, it's so different to get used to what works for them and what sort of ideas they have around success. And even here in Australia, I suppose everyone has a different version of what success in an agency looks like. So I was super curious around that.
I'll give you, I'm an academic at heart. And so there's always a book recommendation, but there's a brilliant woman by the name of Erin Meyer. She's an American, but she's at INSEAD, which is a French business school. And she has this book called The Culture Map, which is essentially an updated version of like the Hofstede cultural dimensions and those ideas, but it's specifically written in a business context of like, here's what you need to understand. But basically every culture, it's sort of to an XY axis kind of grid. And then every country culture can be sort of graphed somewhere on that. And then it helps you get kind of the quick and dirty about what's different about working with this culture. So, even if, you're in a situation where you probably wouldn't call what you do a multinational corporation, but it kind of is, because you've got assistants working over here, or maybe you're distressed. So, all of us are in international business in some capacity right off the bat, right? So all of us can kind of benefit from that. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. Candidly, I hate saying that, because one time Erin and I were both up for an award and she won, and that means that I lost, but her book is worth it. So I'm okay with the fact that it beat one of mine.
That's so funny. I've actually, someone has mentioned Culture Map to me before. It's not the first time I'm hearing it. I'm going to go and get it on Audible. What's coming up, dude? What are you excited about for the year? I know we're going to hang out in Los Cabos soon, and that's going to be cool. What else?
That will be cool. So I'm working on a project now that I don't want to call a book, but I'm writing it. I don't know if it's going to turn into an audio program, if it's going to be a talk, if it's going to be a physical book, or what it's going to be. But it's based on the idea that, especially, for entrepreneurs, for businesses, and we could riff on this for too long, maybe we shouldn't, but that idea that I was talking about before, about really getting crystallized who you help and why. The terminology that I use a lot of times is a sort of like, what battle are you fighting? And it's not yours a lot of times. It's, what is your customer? What battle are they fighting that you can come alongside and help, right? So it's kind of similar to, like, Don Miller has this great book called Story Brand, which is about what is the story that your company is telling, and the customer is always the hero. Like, that's great. I think he missed some of the research on human behavior in the service of a really simplistic concept. So I'm going to try and get a little more true to the science while still being easy to remember. I don't know if that's going to work, or if I'm going to like drag the file into my recycle bin at the end of the summer and say, forget about it. But that's what's been occupying a lot of my thoughts has been that I don't think it's enough to say, oh, we offer this product at this great price anymore. And I don't even think it's enough to tell that sort of compelling aspirational story. If you look at the culture of sort of business today, I think you've got to say either who are you helping or what are you fighting for that someone is helping you fight by buying your product, right? I think it's got to be one of those two things, and how people do that and how they execute it. I'm still in the early phases, which is why this sounds also rough, but that's what I'm looking for, is that sort of battles that we're all fighting type of thing.
Well, I was listening to it earlier when you were talking about, initially started talking about it, and I had goosebumps because it is so apt for the moment. I feel like I love the customer journey, that the customer is the hero and you're just the guide part, and I love how that whole framework works, and I love the fact that you saw the whole of behavior that's missing in their human behavior, and I suppose it'd be super exciting to check out what you come out with. I love the creative process, and I think you love it more and execute it more than I do, and I have a feeling like I should do more of that kind of stuff. Just telling you.
I mean, maybe you should. I will tell you, my favorite part of the creative process is the research part, is the just learning as much as I possibly can about stuff. I have yet to figure out a way to get paid just to do that. So I usually then have to synthesize it and turn it into something useful for people so it can help them, which is also fine. But like the more exciting part is that, and that's the stage that I'm in right now, is that I have all of these ideas and I've got to sort of shh them down. So it's hard to concisely say, this is the next project. But that's what I've been looking at and studying in the past couple months. And actually, candidly, the idea actually came out of talking to a couple different entrepreneurs from MMT in Park City. So I'm hoping I've got the idea crystallized before we go back and you and I are hanging out in Cabo, so that I can go like, boom, here's what I got. What do you think? And then if it resonates with them, then I know I've got something that I should take and actually turn into some sort of work, again, whether it be a book, a podcast, an audio project, just a keynote speech. I mean, I'm a big fan of, I sort of feel like I started as a writer first and then turned to a speaker. And then I met our mutual friend, Joey Coleman, who's like perfected this one talk. And now it's a book, but first it was just a talk. Maybe I should go that route. I don't know. I'm looking into a bunch of that stuff, but first I got to get that idea crystallized.
Yeah. Well, we've done an audio documentary for a naturopath on gut health. That's really doing extremely well for her. It's only been a month and a bit that has gone out, and it's audio documentary. So it's like not like I'm Not Your Guru, like Tony Robbins sort of thing, but longer and audio only. So you kind of in the imagination, and she's interviewed like 25 people that are experts in the field, and it's quite interesting. For me, it was one of the the creative bits that took 2.5 years to find the right client, the right people to bring together this project. So I'm excited to see what you come up with, man. Ladies and gentlemen, davidburkus.com, burkus.com. Links will be in the show notes. Dude, this has been awesome. I feel we can keep going. I think what I would love to do is do one of these in person, because I think that would be super awesome.
We should. I mean, are you going to bring your ATR 2100 to Cabo? Or no, that's actually got an XLR cord on it. What is that microphone? And by the way, because you'll need this clip, thank you so much for having me. All right, now we can go back to that.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Coming up on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I'm David Cohen. I'm one of the founders of Techstars, which is the worldwide network that helps entrepreneurs succeed. This is one of the biases that Techstars has about not funding companies that are founded by one person. I'm running this company, helping run this company. Like, am I even qualified to do that? I've never run a company this big before. So there's the employee thing. Like, you feel like, oh, you're creating opportunity for people. And when you look at the Techstars portfolio, right? I mean, that's tens of thousands of jobs, probably more, rolls around your head. And am I really any better at this than someone that you would pick off the street? And, why me, right? And I have that like literally every day. Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I interviewed Dave because he is the best-selling author, a sought-after keynote speaker, and associate professor of leadership and innovation. He was named as one of the world's top business thought leaders by Thinkers 50. I love his newest book, Friend of a Friend. It offers readers a perspective on how to grow their networks and build connections, one based on science of human behavior. He is also the author of Under New Management and The Myths of Creativity. David is a regular contributor to Harvard Business Review, and his work has been featured in Fast Company, The Financial Times, Inc. magazine, Bloomberg Business Week, and CBS This Morning. He's delivered keynote speeches for Fortune 500 companies such as Microsoft, Google, and Stryker, government and military leaders at the US Naval Academy and Naval Postgraduate School. His TED Talk, not TEDx Talk, his TED Talk has been viewed over 2 million times. He is a father, husband, and friend.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing and sound design by Kelly Bonnyman, Joel Thomas, and Nemanja Bakovic. Voiceovers by Kelly Bonnyman. Guest research and content by Claire Gould and Corinne Castles. Project managed by Shannon Morrison. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and where to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Hey, it's Kaylee from Must Amplify. I'm the sound engineer for this volume of Psychology of Entrepreneurship. I'm a part of the team that made this production come alive. Our team consists of members from all around the globe, with our headquarters based in West End, Brisbane, Australia, the land of the drop bear. For more about the cool stuff that we're up to and to work out of our studios, head to mustamplify.com.